So picking up on page 47, the fourth chapter called Concentration and Wisdom. So starting right in the middle, the Master instructed the assembly. Good and wise friends, the correct teaching is basically neither direct nor gradual. It is people's dispositions that are sharp or dull. The deluded person who cultivates gradually and the more aware person who cultivates directly converge. Each recognizes their original mind, each sees their original nature. In this they are the same. Therefore, direct and gradual are just provisional terms. So, Sixth Patriarch has shifted the focus a little bit here, but perhaps not. The first part of this chapter was devoted to breaking down the difference between concentration and wisdom, or you could say stillness and action or stillness and movement, being in the world but not attached to anything, being not attached yet fully engaged. And so there's this, you could say attention, but it's really not attention, it's just a non-dual functioning of wisdom and concentration. So he says, with wisdom, you're always in a state of concentration, unmoving equanimity. And in that state of unmoving equanimity, you're always manifesting wisdom. Your choices are well placed, well made. You don't make mistakes driven by greed, anger, and stupidity because you're not moving off this centeredness he calls the nature, which is always bright, always seen. And so he now goes on to a next discussion here where he talks about a debate, perhaps, of going on at the time between what are sometimes called the direct and gradual, or the sudden and the gradual approaches to this practice. And here again, like many times before, he comes back to the same point, that these are just terms we use as part of the therapeutics of teaching. It's the same as just saying, well, what Dharma door is the best Dharma door? What practice is the best practice? Is it meditation? Is it bowing? Is it repentances? Is it memorization? Is it mantras and mudras and so forth? And the Sixth Patriarch says, basically all of these teachings, and he summarized to say there's so many, we just say 84,000. None are better and worse. None are higher or lower. None are more direct or more provisional. They're just what's appropriate for a particular person at a particular time. That's the only thing that distinguishes them. In fact, in an earlier part, I think, if we got to it already, he actually says all of these are essentially empty. All of the Dharma doors, and the Dharma itself is empty, and it only arises because of people's needs driven by confusion and suffering. If people never left that ground of their essential nature, their true nature, there'd be no reason for Dharma. So Dharma is merely corrective. It's an antidote to misstepping, to misunderstanding and misperception. Without that, there's no need for Dharma. Dharma doesn't, in fact, exist. I'm trying to find the passage. Maybe it's coming up when he says all of the myriad teachings are nothing but expedients that come from, right, page 30, 29 and 30. It's a very interesting passage. Good and wise friends, bottom of page 29. All of the sutras, these are the teachings that have been handed down, and the writings of the great and small vehicles, and the 12 divisions of the canon. Basically he's saying the whole canonical tradition, all of that, all of these were established because of people. In other words, they weren't pre-established and then people came along. And then they discovered this, in some cave or something. What he's saying is they were established because of people. They came in response to people and people's needs. In the same way, you could say new medicines will emerge as we manifest new symptoms and new illnesses. For example, there's now a new virus going around with a particular mosquito that we didn't have before. And so what are people doing? They're trying to come up with an antidote for this virus. They're trying to come up with something to counteract it. Okay, and this is a continual process. It's not like the virus existed before, and then people say, well, someday there'll probably be a need for this. No, it came in response to. And in fact, the actual creation of the virus will come in relationship to the nature of the agent that's causing it. So often the antidote is built right into the cause and effect of the thing causing this. Somehow medicine works. So in the same way, he's saying here that all of these teachings, all of these sutras, have all come about because of a particular illness, if we want to use that quotation marks, of people, and could only have been set up because of their wisdom nature. Now this is very interesting. You're saying, well, wait a minute. They come about because of people, and it would come about because people are confused. Then why would it be saying it only comes up because of their wisdom nature? It seems to be maybe a little bit of a contradiction. Now, wait a minute, if they have the wisdom nature, then why would they need the antidote? And yet it's saying it's only coming because of people. Now, I could do it rhetorically and just play, or anybody want to jump in lieu of no jumping in? That's okay. Well, let me suggest it is a contradiction, and he didn't get it right, and he really misspoke. And if he was here, he'd say, I'm sorry you misunderstood me. I'm sorry I misspoke. Okay, no, let's not go down that road. It's very funny. On one hand, he's saying all of the teachings, all of the sutras come about because people are afflicted, because people have the poisons, the toxins, the diseases of greed, anger, and stupidity. And therefore, the antidotes are created because of that. But then it says, and it could only have been set up because of their wisdom nature. Well, if they have the wisdom nature, why would they get confused and sick in the first place?
Well, is it that their afflictions are driving them towards something, and that something that it's driving them towards is naturally towards their essential nature? Is that kind of what he's driving at there?
He could be. He could be saying that right within those afflictions is the antidote, which is part of his teaching.
Yeah.
Or that the wisdom nature is covered up with the ignorance for the time being.
Which is descriptive, but he's actually doing something prescriptive here. He's actually getting at him because of their wisdom. So it only comes about, let's say, the teachings only come across because of human stupidity. And they could only come across because of human wisdom.
Well, maybe it's like the human wisdom is analogous to health. You have to have that potential of health to return to it. So if you have an antidote and you get sick, but there's always that potential of health there, or else where are you going to go back to?
I think that's getting closer to what he's saying. It's set up because of the malaise, the diseases, but only if there's a potential to heal will the medicine work. The potential to heal is because of the wisdom. So the wisdom is there, and it's only going to work if there's a wisdom to receive it. In other words, the teachings would not be teachings if there wasn't a potential in the patient or the person to receive it and be healed. So only set up because of the wisdom nature. In other words, they're only set up in a particular way to catalyze and restore and recall that human nature of wisdom, right? So you could say, well, here's a really profound teaching that's been set up in the sutras. Let's just say, I don't know, name some profound teaching you really don't understand at all. Well, obviously. Okay, right, so the Avatamsaka Sutra thing, it's like, okay, that is not going to work if it doesn't resonate. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, if it's so profound that it's beyond our grasp, what would it be its purpose? This is very important to understand because some people say, oh, the Dharma is really profound. I can't possibly wrap my mind around it. It's too, only when I become a great bodhisattva I understand. No, no, no. This is saying this is actually taught for people, to release people, and only because people have the nature to have this potential release would the Dharma be effective. So it's saying two things. If we didn't have this innate potential to heal, no medicine would be useful. We'd be just doomed, and we'd just get sick and die, and that'd be it. So the wisdom nature is the potential to be whole and complete again. And then the teachings are set up because of that, in relation to that. So this is really important to understand. Therefore, the dispensing of this would have to be right to that potential. Right to that potential. Any Dharma dispensed would have to be to that wisdom nature, however crippled or full it was at any one time. And sometimes it might be as simple as, don't do that. And that might be dispensing Dharma, or good job, or silence, or unpacking of something, or extolling the precepts, or encouraging people to sit in meditation. You might not try getting stoned every night. Well, that would be a Dharma spoken to a potential, wisdom potential that was very basically deep and hidden in some place. And hello down there, come out of the cave, Huh? I thought I heard a voice. In the darkness of my stupor and oblivion, I thought I heard a voice saying, wake up. So, or it could be something so profound that you'd have to be in a deep samadhi to understand it. And we know this from different texts. The Buddha enters these very deep states of concentration. From those deep concentration states, speaks very profound teachings that only certain beings understand, and for them it's liberating. And the others, it's just not relevant. So there's a whole range here, but this is important. You're going to ask?
I had a question on what it brings up for me is this idea of the analog to the Big Bang Theory, that if wisdom is eternal, afflictions have arisen out of somewhere. Why have they arisen?
Do you ask yourself that? In other words, the way to do this, what he's doing here, the direct teaching is, where do my afflictions come from? That's what he's doing. The provisional, when he says direct, is going direct to your mind ground. There's no afflictions except your afflictions. And so the key is, where do my afflictions arise from? Now, you don't have to answer that, because it means direct means you direct your attention to that point, other than where in the Big Bang did afflictions come from? Well, even if you could answer that, which probably you can't, I mean, certainly Einstein didn't get a crack at it, and I wouldn't try to attempt it if he didn't, because I can't even understand what he did, much less what he didn't do. But that being said, the Sixth Patriarch would go back to the point, there are no afflictions but the afflictions that are rising right within your own. Those are the living beings of your own nature, and that's the ground that you have to cultivate. Once you cross over them, you might be able then to understand where the afflictions of others are rising from, but not from that ground except through the direct. So again, reverse it and ask, and in a sense, whether there is a Big Bang or not is not a Buddhist concept. There's just constant little bangs called little thoughts. And they are creating. There's no creation, there's just creating, constant creating going on, thought after thought. And so whether there's a Big Bang or not doesn't matter, because the cycle of things just keeps going. There's a really wonderful, one of the disciples early on asked my teacher, well, if the Buddha is all powerful and all knowing and really has all these abilities, why doesn't he just, like that, get us all into the Pure Land, take us all to the Pure Land? And he said, could he do that? Could the Buddha do that? And the teacher said, maybe. And then the next question was, well, is he lacking compassion? And doesn't he? Said, but as soon as you got there, you would go back to the impure land with the first thought you had. In other words, these lands are made from our thoughts. They're maintained by our thoughts and our karma. So changing the world begins by changing your thoughts and your karma, not by asking others or even wondering where their thoughts are coming from, but starting in that very small place and then radiating from there. Okay, so finish this next line. If there were no people in the world, all the myriad Dharma teachings would not exist by themselves. You should realize the myriad Dharma teachings arise because of people, and they're explained for people. So this is a very interesting statement. This Dharma that we are exposed to, that we're hearing, is because of us and for us, and meant for us, and doesn't exist outside of us. And even if it did exist outside of us, it wouldn't have any relevance to us anyhow, and so we wouldn't pay any attention to it. There's also texts that describe Dharma as being much more flexible than we imagine. In other words, by saying there's 10 realms of existence posited, okay? Hells, animals, ghosts, devas, asuras, people, bodhisattvas, and whatnot. And apparently, the Dharma, the teachings of those realms are different. So the teaching for those in the hells, the Dharma for those in the hells, is not the teaching for people. And the teaching for people is not the same that the devas get. And what the devas get is not the same what bodhisattvas get, right? I mean, you don't have to think too deeply to say, well, when I was in kindergarten, I started to learn about crayons. I learned about crayons, and I learned about the tricycle, and I learned that I had 10 fingers, and that was really awakening, and things like that. And then if I took my nap, I got chocolate milk, and now I'm in grad school, and it's a little different, to some degree. There's gradations of learning and gradations of susceptibility or openness to what needs to be the same way here. So instead of thinking of Dharma, some metaphysical body of truth that's hanging out there in space or written on stone, you think about it in a very dynamic, organic way. Whatever liberates and unties is Dharma. Whatever is an antidote for the poisons of my afflictions is Dharma. Anything counts that does that. And so it's in its effectiveness, it's in its pragmatic, if you will, that it becomes Dharma, not in some absolute metaphysical sense. This is really, okay. So that, we went back, and now we're going forward. So what he's saying here, he's saying direct and gradual. This is just another phrase we use. What does it mean? It means for someone who's really sharp, you can be really direct, and they get it really directly. You can go right to the point. You can say, you have all you need to become a Buddha right here and now. Simply pay attention to that, where you misstep, and you're in that state now. And to somebody else, that would not be very skillful. Maybe they have deep feelings of insecurity and inadequacy. Maybe their karma is so heavy that it's going to take a number of gradual steps, and so a provisional teaching is given. And that's all he's saying here. That's the only difference between direct and gradual. It's based on the sharp or dull. And he's not being judgmental here, please. Don't think that he's putting down some and praising others. He's actually being very clinical. He's just saying somebody comes in and they're either in a state of immediate triage that they need attention, or they don't, and they will be going to someplace else for a treatment that's going to suit them. I just make these distinctions based on what manifest, what symptoms appear, rather than judging and saying, oh, this patient's better because they only have a broken leg, whereas you've got, a ripped aorta or something like that. It doesn't do it. It's just meant to be a descriptive breakdown of the different potentials of living beings and people. For example, all of you have a certain potential and inclination for this text, or you wouldn't be here tonight. Now, if you thought you did and you don't, then you won't come next Friday. And if you thought you didn't, you do, you might come next Friday. But it'll be based on whether this resonates with you. This doesn't resonate with everybody in Berkeley. Duh. Right? We could go out, we could run ads, we could do hashtags, flashes, Twitter, the whole thing, tonight, Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, the Sixth Patriarch Sutra. Huh?
It was advertised on Facebook.
How would you know that?
Because I follow.
I know. That was right. So it's even though you advertise it, and in fact, we could get a billboard on the way to SFO that lit up and showed some really attractive whatever, saying tonight, Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. And we'd probably have the same crowd. It wouldn't make any difference. Because without the affinity and without the kind of awareness, in fact, you have to be a little bit awakened even to come. So if you're wondering, when am I going to get awakened? Don't. You're here already. That's already showing some awakening. Seriously. I mean, all the different things you could be doing on a Friday night, you're coming to do this, and you're going, whoa, am I awakened yet? Yeah, you're awakened a bit, because you're here, okay? But, you know, we can also say, well, I'm not that direct and sharp because I wasn't there when the Buddha was in the Jada Grove. You know, I was in some other realm. I was a dog at that time, or I was in the heavens, you know, sipping on marmalade and didn't realize there was any suffering at all. And then I thought there was suffering, but it's two ladies out of the Jada Grove, and all that's left is Marty on a Friday night. Sucks, you know. Okay, sorry, but that's the truth. So if you're really sharp, you might have been there at the time. But then you realize at the time there were people that were really there and didn't get it. You know, in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha starts going, I'm going to tell you something, and they go, oh, I know he's going to tell us something, and they walk out. So a sharpened Tao, you know, it's a relative scale here. He says the deluded person cultivates gradually, and the more aware person cultivates directly, but they converge. This is like Flannery O'Connor's thing. All that rises must converge. Okay, if it's going up, if it's ascending, it's going to converge. Confucius has a similar passage, and I hope you will remind me of what it is. I don't even know which text it's from one of the Sishu. And it's the idea, he said, well, some are born with this, whole and complete, and others don't have it. But those that don't have it through study acquire it. In the end, it's the same. Now, where is that from?
It's from 论语.
论语.
生而知之，学而知之. So there are different level of
Right.
learning things.
But it says basically human nature has this whole and complete. You know, but sometimes we're born into families or friends and situations where we come out a little jaded, a little ragged at the edges. We've made some bad mistakes, we've hung with some bad friends, and it's not clear that we're shiny and bright anymore. But what Confucius would say, no, it's still there, whole and complete, although it's ragged, and you can bring it back. Through study, cultivating yourself, it will return. On the other hand, those who have it whole and complete don't have to do that, but have to be careful of pride and thinking, oh, I'm whole and complete, because that can lead to a fall too. So both in Mencius and Confucius, you get these ideas of a whole, complete fullness to human nature that, when properly cultivated, radiates and shines, ming ming de, and if not properly, it deteriorates, but it's never gone. And that's the famous thing of Cow Mountain that I love, but I won't do tonight to you. But a famous passage comparing us to nature, you know, where our area gets strip mined and ripped over and polluted, but we can, through cultivation, return. We can come back. There's always that possibility. So here he's saying the same thing. They converge, they come together. So again, you can see his non-judgmentalism here. He's purely being analytically, therapeutically descriptive. Okay, you're here, you can get there. Maybe you're closer now, but be careful, you know, that you guard it and maintain it and so forth. He's not saying these are fundamental differences. Each recognizes their original mind, each sees their original nature. That's where the convergence is. The convergence is when you directly see your original mind, your nature for yourself, and you know for yourself. There's no difference between you and the Buddha, you and a sage, the common person and the awakened one. There's no difference whatsoever, because at this point, they're one and the same. In this, they are the same. Therefore, direct and gradual are just provisional terms. Terms we only use in a provisional sense because there has to be transformative teaching dispensed. That's all this is about. It's not saying there's a fundamental difference. It's not even saying there's a caste difference or there's a higher and lower here. All right, this is just really important to understand. Okay, should we move on? All right. Good and wise friend, this teaching of ours from its very inception has taken freedom from thought as its source, freedom from appearances as its essence, and freedom from clinging as its basis. So now we get to a kind of challenging part here. This very teaching of ours from its very inception, the inception he's talking about is what? Everybody know what inception is?
Is it views within views?
What's that?
Is it like perception within perception?
No, it's not perception.
The layers of views?
Inception.
It's the beginning.
The beginning. Beginning. You could say conception, I guess. Inception. I don't know what the difference. They're close. Okay, so inception means start at the beginning. From its very inception. Now, but what is he talking about here? And he's saying this teaching of ours. Is he talking about when he started teaching? So this teaching of ours, meaning what I'm teaching you, my teaching, Hui Neng Dasher's teaching, or is he talking about something else?
Teaching of the way?
What did you say?
Teaching of the way?
Well, of the way, which would not be necessarily just his.
Right.
Okay. Could be the Buddha's teaching,
The
which,
mind ground teaching.
huh?
The mind ground teaching.
The mind ground teaching. If the Buddha's teaching, which Buddha? Which Buddha? Who said the Buddha's teaching? Somebody. I'm just asking. Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, now later in the text, they're going to ask him to be specific on this. I don't want to jump ahead because that's a bad way to read a text. My sisters always used to do that. They'd read novels from the back. They get the first 10 pages, then they read the end. And I was like, wow, why you do that? Because, well, let me tell, no, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I want to read through and get, anyhow, you could do that with the text. It wouldn't make any difference because this is just all expedient devices anyhow, so you could pick it up any place and read it. It's not like it's a story with a narrative. And when you get to the end, you realize, hey, I'm back at the beginning. Whoa, how did that happen? And that's not because the Chinese at the end, you can read it backwards. It's just another read. Anyhow, later he answers this question. He says, it's not even Shakyamuni Buddha. This teaching of ours has an antiquity that's without beginning and without end. And he goes and he says, well, I'll just name you 7 Buddhas that we go back to. And he names what are called 7 Buddhas of antiquity that precede Shakyamuni Buddha. What's really interesting about this is it's kind of splays your sense of time. Well, wait a minute. We always thought it was Siddhartha Gautama who became Shakyamuni Buddha, da-da-da. And this text and many other texts say, yeah, that's just one manifestation in one world of this awakening and one individual who did it. This is going on in other worlds at the same time now. There are Buddhas who are coming into being. There are Buddhas who are dwelling and teaching. There are Buddhas who are getting sick and dying. There's Buddhas that are gone and so forth. And it's not just in this world, it's all over the place. Ah, okay. So that just takes you out of a context. And that's what he's saying. So he's saying this teaching of ours is the teaching of all awakened ones, without time or space, without beginning or end. Now, the specifics may vary. Maybe sometimes they're direct, maybe sometimes they're provisional. Maybe sometimes they're emphasizing prajna paramita, and sometimes they're emphasizing this. But where all these rivers and streams go back is to this original mind ground, this original nature. Everything comes from that, everything returns to that. This is what he's talking about. And it's not going to go away, and it's not going to change, and it's not culturally or historically conditioned or limited, although it manifests differently in cultures and time and so forth. So it's really interesting, kind of an interesting notion. By the way, I just want to say here also, there's no eschatology in this teaching. Everybody know eschatology? Eschatology? Okay. Nobody. Wow. Well, it's probably better you don't, but yeah. Did I hear
Is it close to esoteric?
close to what?
Is it not esoteric? Another way of saying
Esoteric? No, it's not like esoteric. It literally means end of time. And it's a teaching usually associated with different theologies, but it's an idea that at some point it's all going to come to an end. The world and humanity will end. It's called the end of time belief. And with it preceded by a beginning of time. So, for example, in these texts you just hear, sometime I heard. It's like, well, when? No, just sometime I heard. Well, I heard it sometime. When? It doesn't matter. There's no end and there's no beginning here. The text will never say in the beginning or before anything was. You'll never see that in any of the Buddhist texts. They just go immediate res. They just go right to the chase. And here we are. It's happening. And you ask, when did it all begin? They say, Nobody even would ask that question. And when does it all end? There's no ending either. But in eschatology, there's a beginning and an end. Ronald Reagan believed in it. I can make it more close to home for all of you. George Bush believed in it. A lot of people believe in it. That it's sooner or later, it depends, the end of time will come, and time will be no more.
Isn't there a Buddhist phrase from beginningless time onward?
Well, beginningless time is sort of like, yeah, well, beginningless time. And I have a lot of students who say, well, I can't wrap my head around that. Beginningless time and endless. But then I ask, can you wrap your head around beginning and end? You say, well, yes. Well, then, beginning, what was before that beginning? Or did it just begin out of, and then, well, I can't wrap my head around that. Well, when it ends, what happens after the end? Well, so you can't wrap your head around either of them. But eschatology is that belief that there will be an end of time, and then that'll be it. And so it's a notion of a linear progressive view of human history and development that reaches this endpoint and then it stops.
Like so many things.
Huh?
Just like so many things do that, you know. We can think of so many examples that just stop.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you name one?
No.
Oh, okay. She was being facetious.
What can we think of that is just like the ends and there's nothing. There's nothing.
Yeah. So you're faced, but anyhow, some people really believe, and the people that believe in this, some people say it'll just get worse and worse and worse. That's one scenario of the end of time. And it'll finally just end up with just a whole blow up. Hung Sure and I ran into a cult when we were bowing on the coast of California. They weren't Christians, but it was eschatology of another sort. And they believed that the end of time was coming in a comet. Now, it was Halley's Comet at that time. Halley's Comet was coming, shooting through the sky, and everybody was very concerned that Halley's Comet was coming. And we weren't until we talked to them. And it's like, okay, so Halley's Comet's coming, you know. And they said, and behind Halley's Comet, though, is a UFO, a huge UFO flying saucer from the divine realm beyond. And when Halley's Comet comes, that saucer will descend, and Halley's Comet will create an end of time where everything will be blown up and eliminated, except those people who believe they'll be sucked up into the UFO and taken away. Now, don't laugh. They were very serious about this, and they were very serious about converting us to this. And so Hung Sure had the advantage. He didn't have to talk, so he could just sort of listen. And I kind of had to explain, you know, why that wasn't necessarily so appealing to us. But it was an end-of-time scenario. And there's many out there like that. It's not just in Christian eschatology, the end of time is marked by Armageddon, and then there's the second coming follows that accordingly. You know, or it gets better and better. So it gets worse and worse, and you have that, or it gets better and better, and then the new kingdom comes out of the utopian progression. Either way, so we didn't join that cult because we had a pilgrimage to finish. In any event, that cult did go on to go off, but they all went off by committing mass suicide. So this was called Heaven's Gate Cult. They were located in the San Diego area. And then sometime later, I don't remember how many years later, they all neatly put their tennis shoes by their beds, they took some cyanide or something, and they all went off into mass suicide. So time didn't end, but they did in that way. And so there's thinking, anyway, Buddhism doesn't have that. That's my point. So there's no beginning and there's no end in this. And therefore, you can have these ideas of freedom from. Now, this is literally Wu. So those of you who know the Chinese characters know that this is Wu Nian, no thought, Wu Xiang, and I'm thinking Wu Zhu. I'd have to look. Okay, so literally, not. Wu means without not thought, without not appearances, without not clinging. Okay, so the point being here, why this is translated this way as opposed to no thought, no appearances, no clinging, is because in this, the absence, no, means the opposite of what it means in English. In other words, in English, it would indicate nothing, the absence of. Here it means nothing lacking. So Wu, or not in this system of thought means not that there's nothing, but there's nothing absent. It's very important. So when he says the way should be free-flowing, what he means is without hindrance. And that without hindrance means wu, without obstacles, impediments, without anything that blocks. So here he's saying, with our confused thought processes, we obstruct the free-flowing. Remember on the last page he says, the way should be open and free-flowing. How could it be impeded? It could be impeded by our thinking processes, our attached, deluded thinking, and we'll get into this, or it could be confused by our getting set up in appearances and thinking dreams, illusion, bubble, shadows were real, fundamental, substantial, they were me or mine, and therefore we impede our process. Or the last one is by clinging and grasping onto something. And so by doing that, we stop the flow. And by stopping the flow, we become stuck and afflicted. Therefore, we're no longer free-flowing. So he uses wu as liberation from, freedom from, rather than the absence of. This is really important to understand because in this teaching, there is no such notion that of nihilism, of the complete absence, not only of time, but of being. So cosmologically, ontologically, there's no nothingness in this. There's only change, transformation, continuity. So that's why if you want to get to it really down to another level, you say, even if you kill somebody, okay, you do not get rid of them. You merely transform their matter and energy into something else. And that will cycle and return. This is a very interesting concept. So it's not like there's an end, there's only change. Now you change and move things positively, that changes and moves the environment positively. Vice versa, you do it the other way, you change the matter and energy, but it comes back in another way. But there's no elimination of it. So when he's using wu here, he's using it as freedom from that which restricts. You have to see this whole text. In fact, when we went through this text, we were saying what was one of the most common themes. There's a translation technique called concept clusters, where you look at clusters of concepts, and woo, woo, boo, boo, fei, fei, not, is one of the dominant themes of this whole text. And you're like, boy, this guy's really negative. And in fact, what he's doing is he's saying the opposite. He's saying nothing's lacking, nothing's absent, everything's whole and complete. So that's what the wu means. So basically, he says, there's not one thing where it can dust a light. Everything's whole and complete. There's nothing to get. You've got it. You just don't realize it. That's why the wu is used as a liberating concept, not as a concept that should cause you to feel doubt, despair, and emptiness. So that's why we use the freedom from here, and it's not too much of license with the word.
So Marty?
Yes.
Real quick, so going back to the word deception, like, so that's a lot of eloquent description of sort of detached, timelessness. So why does he start it all out by talking about the inception of the teaching? I suppose that's what he's talking about with inception. And you emphasize that.
What he's emphasizing here with the inception is, this is not mine. This is not something I invented. This goes back in a string. And later you'll see he says, I'll only go back 7 for you. And when I go back 7, I'm going back in measures of time that you cannot possibly even imagine, given the frame that we're in. In our frame of reference, because we attach to the 5 skandhas, and we think me, this body, my feelings is it and everything, when those start to change and transform, we immediately jump to the conclusion that it's all over. Hello? No, it's just another change. But because that's our frame, then we locate something we call time within that frame of our coming into being and the separating of our skandhas and say that's time. And like 80 years is a long time. And you go, 80 years, it doesn't even register in the cosmos as being an event. It's so short. So the relativity of our time and space and all these ideas, and even inception, being within a framework of our limited span, that's all we can think of. Until we let go of that. When we let go of that, then time and space become something else entirely. Entirely. But right now, he's just using inception to say beginningless time, wherever this began, if you call it, it began, Wherever it is, it goes back and it goes back and it goes back, but it's not mine.
Yeah, okay.
But it has as its markers, these three things. The absence of confused thinking. That's what he means by thought here. He doesn't mean you're not thinking. It means you're not wrongly thinking. You're not thinking wrongly. It doesn't mean your mind stops. It just stops being an obstacle to your awakening. So it's a functioning of quality rather than saying, oh, he means no thought. Is that possible, to have no thought? Well, you said, when does it stop?
That's not what he's saying here. It's detachment from thought in the midst of thought, he says.
Then he's going on to be very clear, because he always feels people will mistake this to be, then all I have to do is stop thinking and I'm awakened. All I have to do is stop paying attention to appearances and I'm awakened. Well, how would I do that? I close my eyes. I stuff up my ears. I dull my sense organs. I go into a state of withdrawal from reality and think I'm awakened because nothing touches me. And he says that's not freedom from appearances. And then no dwelling means in the midst of being, you don't attach to anything. It doesn't mean you don't have a home. You do have a home, or you don't have a home. But it doesn't mean you would say, my home is me, I am my home. You don't attach to it. It doesn't mean you leave your body. Your body is a kind of dwelling place that you have. He says it's sort of like a hotel room. Use it in that way. But it doesn't mean that you detach from everything and don't care about anybody. That you stuff down your body and your mind and don't have any feelings and sensibilities. And that you think that, oh, how am I going to stop my mind, my thinking mind? You can't. You can't. Even in your sleep, you can't. Everybody knows that, right? How many of you dream? Well, I mean, in your sleep. Right? That's the mind going on. It doesn't cease. It doesn't stop. There's no time it stops. So he's not advocating stopping the mind. He just means no thought confused. Catching those, not thinking. Okay, questions?
So Marty, timelessness, is he referring to it as something that's eternal? The eternal aspect of timelessness, or is it the absence of cause and effect, or is it both?
See, eternal is a time phrase. It's really funny.
Right.
As soon as you say it, you're committing yourself to, some kind of, and he wouldn't even use that. It doesn't, first of all, there's a very interesting text that we read early on. It's called the poison arrow simile, or metaphor. And there's a disciple who comes to the Buddha, and he's meditating, and he starts to think. Instead of having freedom from thought, he starts to entertain a particular kind of thought. He says, I wonder when the universe began. I wonder when the universe ends. Wonder when the Buddha began, when the Buddha ends. And what happens to Buddha after death? And what happens to me after death? And blah, 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 blah. And he's going on. And he's like, so he comes up with, I think, 13 questions like this. Is the universe eternal? Is it not eternal? And, and he's going, I'm going to go ask the Buddha and have him square it. If he doesn't answer these questions for me, I'm out of here. Because obviously he's stupid. He doesn't know. And so he comes to the Buddha and he says, give me the answers, tell me the answers, and what are your questions? He says, and the Buddha says, well, did I ever tell you to come and study with me because I promised to answer those questions for you? He said, no. He said, so why are you asking me and holding me accountable now to answer those questions for you? And he said, well, I just want to know you're a good teacher and got the answers. And then he said, well, I can't pronounce it. Malunkya is his name. Malunkya, something like that. He says, so if you answered those questions, would that help you in your state of confusion and suffering now? If you knew the answer? And he said, well, maybe not. And he says, okay, it's like this, Malunkya. If a person's out walking and they're hit by an arrow, and the arrow's a poisonous arrow, and it goes in here, right? What would that person do? Would that person be wise to go to a doctor right away and have that arrow taken out and given some antidote and healed? Or would it be better for the person to pause and say, I wonder who shot that arrow and what direction it came from and whether the shaft was made of bamboo or oak and what bird the feathers on the arrow came from and was it an iron tip or a metal tip and what poison was on there? And I wonder how long I would have to live if I just sat here and so forth. And the monkey said, I get it, don't wait to answer those questions, get to the doctor. And he said, in the same way, my teaching is to get you to the immediate question of existence and the problem of existence, and not to answer these eternal verities that may or may not have answers. And even if you did speculatively answer them, they would do you no good for the existential condition of your life. So this is one of the famous teachings about getting into this realm of speculation of eternity or not eternity, because it's not relevant. And it's probably not answerable either. And even if it was answerable, what difference would it make?
Yeah, it could be fun though.
It could be fun. And I agree, if there's nothing else to do, you know, but while you got the arrow, fun takes on a different dimension. So anyhow, we'll just shoot ahead to let you know a little bit maybe you should unpack this a little bit. So Nian, thought, what does it mean when I say no thought? Anybody, quickly? Thought? What's a thought?
Would it be like spending,
Like what?
like focusing on a meditation topic?
A meditation, that's a thought. Meditation topic, what else?
An idea.
An idea. What's an idea? Do you have any thoughts on your dissertation? No? So all these things you're setting out are just without thoughts.
Dreams, bubble, shadows.
Yeah, they're dreams, illusions, bubble, shadows. Try turning that in.
That's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah, so you're engaged in thought after thought after thought, idea after idea, right? Weighing, separating, balancing, combining, separating, cutting, pasting, blah, blah, blah. What else? Huh? Well, that's very interesting because in this narrative, in this psychology, thought is not Rodin's. Okay? Thought is the activities of consciousness, which are impulses, reactions, emotions, fears, anxieties, longings, desires, as well as, ideas, E equals MC squared. That's a thought. Okay? Is the universe eternal? That's a thought. What happens to me after I die? That's a thought. But every impulse and stirring is in the realm of nian, of thought. So that's why it's sometimes used wang xiang, meaning false thought, or wang nian, or wang qing, meaning feeling emotion. They're all lumped together as activities of the mind, of the unawakened mind. This is the difference. The unawakened mind goes out and grasps and worries about this. The past, the present, and the future. That's what we do. Okay, so that's one of the couplings, triplings we do. We then in our mind create a past, a present, and a future, thinking they really exist. Now, if I told you they didn't, you'd first go, well, let's see, do they? So where is the past? I'm willing to be, impressed. Bring it.
In our mind.
Okay, in our minds, and that's where. And the future? Let's see, where's that? Down the road. Okay? But certainly we have the present. Wow! We've been tricked. So past, present, and future are completely thoughts. They're wrong thoughts. We've created them. They have no correspondence to things as they really are. And then we live within that, thinking that we're thinking. Seriously thinking. I'm making plans. I'm regretting the past. So basically, the future is a place we never get to. Okay? It hasn't, some that the classic texts say, the future has not yet come. Yeah, well, that's true, but it's also a place you never get to. Because when you get to it, it's not what you, so it's no longer the future when you get to it. And it wasn't what you thought it would be anyhow. Even when you get to it, it's still the now. So right now is yesterday's future. Right?
But Marty,
Yes.
if we use our thoughts of the past, that can be a vehicle for liberating ourselves, can it not?
It can be a vehicle for liberation, but can also be an anchor for imprisonment. So to use it, which is what he's talking about here, and not be abused by it is the trick. So you can, for example, have a recollection about something that you did that was wrong. And you want to then make a resolve not to continue to do it, but you don't want to keep going back and saying, oh, my past is just filled with wrong after wrong. I'm going to write, a volume. And you're going to wallow in the wrong. In the same way, yesterday I did a good deed. Wow, I really did a good deed yesterday. Yesterday I did a good deed. Okay, move on. It's like, and so the idea is this future that we talk about is we never get to it. It's never where and the past can't be got at. Moreover, if we tried to go to it, it's not where we left it. It's the past is never where we left it. You really can't go. And the present is someplace we never are. Really. So if you try to think about it, past, present, and future, they're just chimera. They're illusory things we set up that then condition our thoughts into a pattern. Right? And then with that pattern comes clinging, comes regret, comes anticipation, all wangshan, all false thinking that lead us into then expectations, hopes, attachments, and either the disappointment of those or the constant restructuring of those. And in fact, it's a complete false scenario. It's a thing that we create. So what he's talking about here, he doesn't say don't have thought, don't be in the world, don't have grounding to your existence, but don't mistake that for something it is not. It is not solid and real. It doesn't last, it doesn't stay. There's just this continuous flow. And in attending to that, you're free from and you're moving within. That's the free flowing he's talking about. But if you think about it, I think about it. How much time do I spend in the past? If I asked you to keep an app, download the app, which is to calculate my mind today. How much time, you get the little pie, right? How much of the, you have 3 things in the pie. How much was the past? How much was the future? And how much was here and now? And it's amazing. We spend most of our time in space and time that does not exist. But we think we're living in the real world. And someone meditates and says, hey man, get real. Get in the real world where I am. I live in the past. Past, present, and future, really busy. But the person that's in the really busy tells the other person, you're wasting your time. It's useless. Get real. In the real world, the future. What's more real? The person sitting in meditation, sort of attending to the here and now, or somebody's out there, what world? Well, the past, present, and future world that I imagine I live in. Okay. Yeah.
Notice some Buddhist-oriented scientists actually have done that study, so there's a number.
There's what?
There's a number. It's apparently 47% of the time we are dwelling in the past or future.
47% of the time. I can break that record. Yeah. So anyway, we can stop and pause there for tonight, but I wanted to make it clear that the freedom from is talking about potential, not a restricting and limiting of it. It's actually opening up our fuller potential. Nor, and this is very important, is it talking about a removal of ourselves, a opening up and releasing reality from our relationships, from our own being, but actually attuning those to match up with things as they really are. And you could see if you did this, if you matched up and you stopped projecting and attaching, just in human relationships, there'd be a lot smoother thing going on. A lot smoother thing. If I just stopped seeing you as projections of my ego who exist to fulfill my needs or frustrate my desires, and I just saw you as other living beings like myself without projecting, without attaching, I mean, the relationship would be very, very different. I would actually probably even see you more closely for what you or who you really are, rather than images of my needs and desires or fears. And in doing so, I would honor and respect you more for who you really are, rather than how you meet or frustrate mine, and so on and so forth. And then might even be somewhat useful to suggest something that might be helpful to you, rather than, something I would want back from you in return. Now you can just see, you can say, well, Buddhism is about removal. No, it's not. It's about right here and now in the world. If you just took these principles and not, freedom from thought, freedom from appearances, freedom from dwelling, and just used them in human relationships. Now you don't have to leave home and become a monastic to do this. You could have a great effect on creating a different world. Simply because you say, there's no me or mine. It's not about me. Okay? If it's not about me, then it must be about all of us somehow, and then who's us? Who are you apart from my projection and so forth? And you start to look at it that way, wow, that'd be very different. Parenting would be very different to children. Right? When you grow up, I want you to be, oh, really, whoa, whoa. Yeah, you'll appreciate this later, da-da-da, right? Parenting, teaching, classroom teaching, and then you started to work this into your relationship with the environment, you know, as an environmental ethic of how you relate to the environment, not as created for me and mine, not as my domain, not as existing and only existing because it's in service to my needs or something, but part of me. The Bodhisattva sees no difference between himself and herself and the whole world, all worlds and all living beings. Wow, that's this Wu Nian, Wu Xiang, Wu Zhu. Now you get into that space, that's a pretty radically engaged social agenda, psychological agenda, and natural world agenda. So please, when you read this, don't read this as some sort of, this is meditation remove. This is actually a very, very powerful teaching about how we might re-engage ourselves, with each other, and the larger world in a really radical way. So what are you doing in front of you? You're going to a radical cell here. You guys are becoming consciousness revolutionaries. But believe me, you change the world, you just change your mind. You change your mind, you will change the world. But that's not the goal. It's just one of the benefits that spin off of this. It's just the beginning. Okay, enough for, no other lasting questions, comments? Okay, we will plod on, I promise you, next week. And we're almost at the end of this chapter. This is a really, really good chapter. Okay, announcements?
Tomorrow we have the Antarctica lecture, 7:30. We have a lecture from Australia. So we're lecturing. We show up on the screen. And the next week we have...
Speaking of time and space.
Next week we have the Guanyin session day. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva.
What's that? What's the Guanyin Day?
Next Saturday.
Yeah, what is it though?
What is it?
Well, what happens on...
We start from 8 o'clock. That will be, I think, the 8th precept transmission. And we will recite the Avalokiteshvara name, circulate this space, sit and recite aloud and recite in silence. And we finish in 5 o'clock, and also you're welcome for lunch.
This is not tomorrow, it's next week.
Next week, yes. And you can find more information in our website, berkeleymonastery.org.
By the way, when you recite the name, it's the same Nian as Wu Nian. So this no thought and Nian Fo, it's the same Nian. So it can mean mindful. So in a sense, what you're doing by reciting, if you were to come on Saturday, you're just engaging your Nian in a certain track to sort of get to know what it's doing and how it's working and whatnot. Okay, so it's not Wu Nian, it's Nian Guanyin. But in doing that, holding your mind in that pattern to recite, you get a ground or position to observe the mind as it runs off in all the different directions. Nobody is going to come Saturday and enter the Nianfo Samadhi and not even eat. But what it does allow you to do is to hold your mind on a track, so to speak, and then you can feel it waver and move. And in that wavering and moving, you begin to see how you move off of Wu Nian, right? So people say, oh, just come and recite the Buddha's name. I go, why? Why would you come and recite the Buddha's name? Because in reciting the Buddha's name, you get to know yourself. Not the Buddha necessarily. Yes, it's eventually the Buddha. But you get to know yourself better. So this is a technique in mindfulness training. It's not about invocation of special things that are going to be given to me. It's a chance to observe your mind in a laboratory situation. And you might find that interesting. That's the direct teaching. Okay, sorry. And there's a vegetarian meal?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put it on my calendar. Yes.
There's also the
the Sunday, whole day Tao recitation, so if you want to practice that.
In case you didn't catch your mind on Saturday, you can come back on Sunday and watch it again.
All day.
Now, that being said, do not, in terms of futuristic thought, do not wait till Saturday and Sunday to attend to this. Do it now. Carpe diem. Okay, no other announcements? Okay, let's transfer in English. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding Li San Bao.